The social challenges that we are currently facing are perhaps the greatest of our generation. COVID-19 has already had a dramatic impact on local and international politics. Citizens have looked to their leaders and stakeholders to present solutions to an evolving health and economic crisis, one that has only served to further expose deep-seated inequalities and the limitations of politics. Yet the pandemic has also given a platform to the opportunities of citizen-driven local initiatives to address social needs. We have witnessed the power that can be harnessed by such initiatives, connecting and sharing on a global scale. Still, the crisis has left us with more questions than answers, and how we proceed to address them will be crucial to shaping our present and future. Will we see a rise in nationalist tendencies as a long-term result? At the local level, confrontations, riots, and hostile communication are on the rise. How can urban communities reinvent themselves to overcome mistrust, fake news, and anti-democratic developments? How can we hold elected leaders accountable and ensure they represent the needs of their citizens while protecting democracy in the face of illiberal tendencies? What is the integrative power of local initiatives, and is the spreading of ideas becoming borderless?
On civil responsibility as part of the Berlin Questions Conference. My name is Leona Lynen. I'm part of Zusammenkunft Berlin, one of the 5 partners that cooperatively and in joint responsibility is developing Haus der Statistik. Without the commitment of Initiative Haus der Statistik, this today would not be a model project for cooperative urban development. After many years of vacancy, a group of very much committed artists stood up and demanded that this 50,000 square meters of vacancy in the center of Berlin would be turned into affordable spaces for art, culture, and education. After many open network meetings where jointly and with the support of many engaged citizens, a joint vision was formulated for what could be done with the city, with the city and also with this building. The initiative persuaded the city of Berlin to buy the site from the Federal Republic and to turn it into a model project for the common good and into a lively quarter with affordable housing, long-term affordable spaces for art, culture, and education, and very much needed spaces for administrative uses. Today, we're 5 partners. We're the Senate Department for Urban Development and Housing, the local district, 2 publicly owned companies, WBM as a local housing corporation, and BIM, Berlin Real Estate Management, and us, who I stand here today as a representative for Zusammenkunft Berlin, a cooperative that was founded from the core group of the initiative that are jointly, collaboratively developing the site. Before we start and before we dive into civil responsibility, I'd like to thank all the people that are less visible than me today, who I sit on the stage, but that have contributed largely to making this event possible. First and foremost, Berlin Questions, especially Visit Berlin, and also Ludwig, who's sitting there here today, for inviting us to be part of this conference. But also all my colleagues here at Haus der Statistik, who amidst all difficulties that the ongoing pandemic is bringing to hosting real-life events, but also to the still ongoing holiday season, have brought together this fantastic program and have made possible that there's ice cream and cold drinks around. A big shout out to Constanze, Daria, Laila, Rahel, Luca, Andreas, Stefan, Kim, and everyone else who have contributed to making this possible. Thank you very much. But we also have fantastic guests here today with me on the stage, who I will introduce shortly. And I would like to thank them, but also all of you who have came here today and who have chosen to come to Alexanderplatz on a Friday night with 30 degrees rather than jumping into Müggelsee. I hope that at least we can offer some refreshing food for thought on civil responsibility and that you enjoy the evening despite the heat. When we look around today, and this is a brief intro into today's topic and to bring the setting back to the side, we see that not only Haus der Statistik is changing, there's a lot of rubble lying around, there's cranes, and fortunately now no more construction sound and noise, but also the city is changing. And in recent years, there has been a major debate who is actually the driving force and responsible for shaping how cities and neighborhood and communities are being designed. And in addition to municipal partners and representatives from politics that are here on the couch on my right side, more and more citizens, just like you, have demanding their say, have demanding to shape their immediate environments, and have also actively contributing to shaping the cities. They have through very practical actions, promoted the common good. For example, they run libraries or swimming pools that no longer can be financed from understaffed municipal budgets. They have developed collective ownership models to dedicate spaces to the common good. But also, they have played more and more an important part in actually the provision of public services. In short, people have taken responsibility. However, and this is what we can also see today here at Haus der Statistik, it's not only about delegating responsibility. It's also about delegating power and about sharing resources. And there's still a long way to go. And this mismatch shall be our starting point for the discussion today. We have two panels that will build on top of each other. The first one here is on civic-public partnerships. We will explain more what we mean with that complicated term. And the second one, which will be moderated by my colleague Konrad, will focus on urban governance, so exactly the sharing of resources and powers, and also what this all has to do with the land question. Who is actually owning the land? But enough talking from my side. Welcome to panel one, and also welcome to our fantastic guests. With me here today are Wenke Christoph, to my right. She is State Secretary in the Berlin Senate Department for Urban Development and Housing, and also as the co-founder of the working group Linke Metropolenpolitik. She has been working on housing and urban development policies for many years. Ephraim Gothe, to her right, is the district councilor of Berlin Mitte. He was even surprised that this was the term, Bezirksstadtrat. And he is responsible for urban planning, but also one of the leading figures in the development of the very site that we're here today, Haus der Statistik. Welcome, Ephraim. To my left, Patricia, she's the Chief Program Officer at the IKEA Foundation, and through her previous engagements with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but also PATH, that is a global nonprofit improving public health, she has gathered extensive experience in negotiating public-private partnerships that are maybe a bit more established than public partnerships. To her left, Caroline Paulik-Thiel, she's the Executive Director of Politics for Tomorrow, a non-partisan initiative that fosters innovation for, but also with the public sector through a human-centered approach. I'm very honored and happy to have you all, and thank you for sparing your time. So what is this civic-public partnership complicated term thing, actually? In a civic-public partnership, very similar to the development here at Haus der Statistik, civil society, together with the administration and politics, set out to realize a goal together. So rather than fighting each other or each and everyone only working in their dedicated departments, we jointly decide and jointly control, but also jointly implement what has been decided. So the responsibility for the whole is formally shared in the long term. I would argue that the establishment of a common organizational form, such as a Verein, a GmbH, or a foundation, a Stiftung, might contribute to a fair amount to pursuing a common interest. That would also lead to working at eye level for real. Because often there's a lot of talk, yes, we work at eye level, but if you are in a joint formal entity, this would actually become formalized. And also, at least this is also a statement that I would like to give to this round, it would lead to higher flexibility in the interaction between civil society groups, politicians, and the administration. This so much for the introduction. Wenke, I would like to start with you. In your opinion, and also in your role, of course, as a representative of Berlin Senate, In what way do you think could civic-public partnerships contribute to solve this antagonism that I just explained between civil society initiatives on the one hand and administration on the other hand?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to this very interesting talk. And maybe I would like to start answering your question with the point that I think both collaboration or collaborative urban development and protest and conflict are, they will not, there's not only one or the other. I think when we are talking about public civil responsibility, this does not mean that I'm not expecting there not to be any conflicts anymore. But that in certain projects we change our roles, we learn from each other, we take up, as you said, common responsibility, like here at Haus der Statistik or at Dragoner Areal, for example, where the partners commit towards a common goal. But I think that we still need the conflicts that we have in the city, conflicts around land, as you mentioned, conflicts around how do we want to develop our city and who is part of these decision-making processes. And I think Haus der Statistik is a very good example that's started with a protest and lots of, confronting also public actors, administrative actors, political actors, in order to put this kind of change into reality in a way. So this is maybe my first point. We will not have also these collaborations are not without conflict, and I'm not talking, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. It's like these processes.
Ephraim will touch on this point, I'm sure.
I think he will. So they will. These are both processes need to happen. But what I would say is has been happening in the last couple of years is that public actors, people from public administrations, politicians have learned that we are not only talking about more participation in our cities. This is a debate that we also have to have, and where our administration put a lot of effort into in the last years into developing guidelines for public participation for the whole city and all the districts, which is an important starting point for even further collaborative models. But that we are moving into a direction where we need these kind of model projects to show how we can develop the city together. And I think that models like Haus der Statistik or others, they can represent a different way of working together that we are just starting to develop here, and that might shape our cities in the future much more than we expect it to be now.
Thank you, Wenke. Ephraim, Wenke already mentioned even in cooperation, there's still conflict. From our joint experience here at Haus der Statistik, which I would argue is already a prototype for a civic-public partnership, what would you say can be learned from where we are, and what could be also transferred to establishing this model also in the long term, maybe in even a joint running of this space in the future?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation too. And what about the conflicts? Very important is the headline civic-public partnership. And for working together in such a collaboration, it needs rules. And the most important rule is that we have the rule to find the decisions we have to make each week, each month, together. And we have 5 partners, 4 partners from the official side of the city. Now you can say, oh, okay, it's easy, you have 4 votes and the initiative only 1. No, we have to find all the decisions together. And I think this is very important to get a good solution for every problem. And we have to discuss a problem up to the point where we can say, okay, now we find a decision how we can make together And I think this is the most important rule of the process we have here in Haus der Statistik.
Good decision-making processes and trust, and the aim to also find a shared decision-making basis.
It's not only trust, it's a kind of rule we have.
So Patricia, are there, from your experience with public-private partnerships, is it also that decisions are always found jointly and on consensus, or is there also maybe different power dynamics between different partners from your experience working together with administration and also governments?
Sure. Is this on? Yes. Thank you for inviting me here, and it's wonderful to see what's being done with this space, because I'm so aware, not just this city, but other cities I've been to, of the just buildings sitting empty. Yet every city has a housing problem, and that's always been something that's not well understood. So I'm so happy to see this happening here. My background, as Leona described, I've been working in philanthropy over a number of years and in very different sectors to this. So in health and now in climate, and I don't have much familiarity with urban development and housing. But it's amazing to hear that the struggles are really the same. And the example I'll give here is going back many years in the collaboration between industry and the public health community. Because it wasn't a pretty story to begin with, but yet I think all of the progress that's been worked on and all the antagonism that's been worked through has produced the corona vaccines that we see today. Because all of that work going on in the background and all that decades of developing trust between the private sector and the public health community and governments around the development of products. It wasn't an easy one. I've sat at the table there and used philanthropic funding to help move this along. But way back and going into the decades before in health, when the private industry had a terrible reputation in the public health community, particularly around HIV/AIDS, and making existing products available at different prices to countries that were experiencing the HIV epidemic. It was brutal at that point. I mean, the public health community had no trust in industry, and industry felt entirely threatened by the public health community, who wanted all products, lots of them, for very cheap. And so I wasn't there in those days, but I came in later, working with philanthropic dollars to bring the two communities together and to get these vaccines and drugs developed more quickly. And I'm happy to say, I mean, things aren't perfect. They never are. Motivations are very different. Constraints, institutional constraints are very different. But I think with a lot of slowly developing trust and having empathy for the other side of the table, you do get to a point where you understand each other so well and you understand your constraints so well that you can find these common solutions. And I think that's why we see that the very quick development of coronavirus vaccines, because a lot of work had been going on, progressing in the background with public financing, with private philanthropy, and with commercial and governmental research institutions, importantly, but also commercial activities to bring vaccines to scale at the level we're seeing them today. I think it's a very good story, and even though it's from an entirely other sector, I think there are a lot of lessons there for us. So I'm amazed that you're making such quick progress here when you have a lot of different motivations going on. With the work in climate, and I can speak to that later, we have been funding civil society to work with government to advance progress on climate mitigation at the local level and the global level. So I'm happy to talk about that as well.
Thank you, Patricia. What I hear a lot is the word trust. What I hear is also the word process, that it takes time. And what I could hear from Patricia is also that you sort of stepped in as an intermediate body, as sort of a mediator between the private sector and the public sector. And you brought in cash, which of course is also an interesting factor. Caroline, from your experiences working a lot with administration and politicians, how would you describe the sort of current cultural setting? Is it ready for, in both administration and politicians, to also step into new roles, to actually delegate power and to enter into these new collaborations? What is needed from your perspective?
I think we see a certain readiness in the public sector, in administration, in politicians, single people. But what we also see is a kind of structural backlog, a kind of structure that is actually not fitting anymore the mental models that we can observe. Also, especially over the last year, we have been starting a kind of recurring survey with public administration called Innovation Recorder, where we actually invited people after each wave to document their experience and also see how euphoric people were just a year ago, actually thinking about the big change and how frustrated they are right now, seeing that things are moving very slowly. But what I can say, facilitating the process for the development of the new smart city strategy here in Berlin is that, yes, if people are actually putting aside their ego, if they're concentrating on what is best for everybody, if they're communicating and if the communication is facilitated between different parties, between different types of people, I think we're all still individuals with our own ways of wanting something or being interested in something. Yes, I can say from my practice there is a way forward. And there's also a way forward of playing with roles, of taking away your hat, putting on another hat, actually experiencing, building empathy, even compassion by putting yourself into somebody else's shoes. What I would like to add to what Patricia just said is that we have to be very, very careful, in my point of view, in times of a climate crisis, in times of a corona crisis, in times of a housing and social crisis, to not build further dependencies. And what I can see with civil-public partnership opposed to or versus private-public partnerships is that we actually don't only give the governance or the way of building decisions to a different group of people who normally hasn't been at the table at all. It's really new. It also means, unlike you have practice now, but a lot of people who should be there haven't had the time to test, haven't had the time to try out. It's like women voting rights, you know, like how many 100 years are men in the business and women haven't been? And it's something you need to practice. It's not only a rule, and I think what you mean is a code of conduct, it's a way of, you know, how can we actually build so we can look into each other's eyes and all have, I would even call it decision hygiene, you know, have a kind of way of not pushing forward or holding back, letting the quiet talk, pulling the loud one out. But how can we actually practice a better way of taking decisions that concern us all, not only for now, but for the next decade and for the next decades?
Ephraim, from your experience as the local district councillor, is that cultural change even possible within an administration that for years had a similar way of working, of functioning? What would you need in order to also move towards more, maybe a better collaboratively spirit within your own administration?
Yeah, first I would like to say it sounds a little bit too easy only to find some rules and then it works. That's right. I think there are two important points for the success of this project. The first is that it takes time to find trust, to developing trust, and in this case, it began before the last election. I think in 2013 or 15. Then the initiative find this plot and developed the ideas for that plot, and then it needed 1 or 2 years that the political parties anticipate these ideas. And so we had, before the last elections, a little kind of common sense in the Green Party, in the Social Democratic Party, and in the Party of the Left. Party of the Left. To the Left Party, okay. For what will we do with this plot? And so it would be easy if the three partners of the new coalition make their contract for the decade now, and mentioned the idea of the House of Statistics in that contract. So before work began, we had 3 years of political discussions with the initiative. And then after that, we had some more early decisions how to work on this plot, what is the mix of use, that we get a new town hall on the plot, that we get a lot of use of social and cultural use in the house A on that. All that needed time. And what most important is, for if you are thinking how to get more of these kind of projects, we have great luck with the initiatives we are working together here, because this initiative is very professional. Because inside of that initiative we have some architects, city planners, and people who knows how complicated it is to get a zoning plan and how to get a permit for the buildings. And so other projects can be successful only if we found initiatives who are so professional as well.
Well, thank you for that compliment. Wenke, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, when we're more or less talking about like the conditions or the factors that enable this kind of collaboration, right? So, and Ephraim just added a lot of like factors, like the political will, also, which is constituted in the coalition treaty. And I think that was like an important point, like that you mentioned, and that also shaped the possibility of administrative actors, of public companies to actually involve themselves into a complicated process like this. Like when you look at it, for example, the housing corporation or the BIM, this is a very uncommon process for them, where they are asked to like build in a different way, plan in a different way than they would usually do. And the will to involve oneself in one of these in a process like that is also shaped by the political will in the city and in the coalition that like constitutes it. And I think that was an important point. You also mentioned, or both of you, time, money, and also enabling civil society actors that are very professional, like you said, or experts in a lot of topics in this collaboration, but also organizing the resources to be able to work on eye level. Because it's, you know, like you can't expect people from civil society to do all this in their free time. When there's like professional actors that do this in their daily work that is paid. So these processes, they need a lot of preconditions to work, and therefore a lot of commitment of actors to actually enable these processes. Otherwise, they might just be fake participation, you know, like opening up the space but not really filling it. And I think that this is one important learning process that also administrations take out of these processes already. Like if we want to do this, if we want to enable collaborations, we need to have the time to do this, and to you know, organize the time to do this. We need to organize the money, and so that we can actually work on eye level.
Organizing money and resources and political will. From what I hear from you, there seems to be political will to establish civic-public partnerships. Let's see where the elections take us. Ephraim, you wanted to add something
I want to add a third point. We mentioned time and money. We mentioned the professional initiative. And I think the third point is what we need on the way of the process, along the development process, participation with the civil society outside of the process. And we found a lot of different participating processes with the initiative in the last 3 years to find the right shape of the urban development of the whole area. With, I think, 100 of different kinds of participation. So we get a lot of hints from outside if we are on the right way or if we are on the wrong way. So the participation along the process is the third important thing to be successful.
Which also has to do with transparency of processes like these, so that they don't become a closed shop between you and us, because we are only a small fraction of civil society, but by far not civil society as such. Caroline, you wanted to add something.
I just, what you're saying is a lot of ifs, and I think we are building here the conditions for something that actually should be available much broadly and shouldn't be a single case or something super special that can only happen if this and that is in place. So I'm saying, coming also from a background of scientific process facilitation, I think like a real laboratory that actually has some type of research around it, it could actually help to understand what is coming along your way that you're experiencing right now. And there's a lot more ifs and that's that actually might have to be. And how can it also be mainstreamed or scaled after you're going through this process, but while you're going through this process, so other people can actually take it on and learn from it? Because what I see on a city level in terms of city strategies, we have so many city strategies. What we're doing right now is trying to streamline the different goals of the city strategies. So we actually don't go in this a jungle of different measures and objectives and another big paper to read, but actually understand where do we want to go in Berlin and how can civil-public partnerships be a crucial building block in enabling the implementation of strategies that we've already decided and that we've already actually moved forward to a certain extent. And I think here for me there's a lot of music in this tool. And I see it really like that. And, we know it also from Finland, where there are public-private people partnerships, especially in the regional context. So then the private sector is invited as well. But I think we need to look at these models of how we're actually implementing the strategic goals that we already have and that we can't, we don't have to rediscuss every year again.
So less talking, more into action. Patricia, you wanted to add something. You would need your mic so that the audience at home would also understand it. Thank you.
This is sounding so familiar. I'm just thinking as the climate community and how we work on issues, and specifically, as I mentioned when I was talking on Wednesday, the C40 network of mayors, of which Berlin is a part, which is a network of progressive mayors working on climate issues and sharing their solutions. And how much support governments need in order to implement plans or even develop plans. And it's a matter of resources and time and expertise, and that's where philanthropic funding, I think, can come in an important way. But I'm interested in hearing about the approach of the climate community, and those of us funding it is to not just support those in policy-making roles, but to support civil society. But then there are many elements of civil society. There is, for example, we do need young people in the streets who may not have the best solutions, but they've got the passion and the energy to move all of society forward. We do need to fund more expert civil society groups that Ephraim, I heard you mention, the professionals who know how to advise government to provide the technical expertise and the solution sets. So I'm just interested in hearing what is the kind of the suite of civil society organizations that are needed to help advance these city strategies. It's not just any one group. In my mind, it's a variety of groups that need to be not necessarily at the table, but part of the whole ecosystem.
Wenke, you want to answer that? What is needed? What do you need as a politician in order to move forward?
I would say well, this is just kind of a brainstorming now, but well,
Welcome to the brainstorming session.
Yes, I think what is happening at the moment is that we have more and more, I would say, intermediary organizations that try to mediate between, or like build up structures that are somewhere between administration and civil society, and building up platforms. For example, the roundtable on land policy that we have for a couple of years now in Berlin, or the initiative forum on urban politics that we are funding from by our administration as well. So this is an interesting development that I think might help to bring actors together. So it's not just one type of civil society organizations I'm looking at, but more, I'm more interested in platforms and how they can, for example, bring, like develop pathways of communication, be it conflictual or be it collaborative, between politics, administration, and civil society on different topics. And I think that this is an interesting way that we've started to actually say, okay, this is a responsibility of public administration to support these kind of platforms, because they need funding in order to do this kind of networking, in order to do this kind of like agenda setting support for civil society initiatives, and that these might lead to more maybe professional or more successful collaborations or political processes. And this could be an interesting way to look at it. And I think the important part is that these kind of organizations or platforms need some kind of continuous support and funding in the end as well. I'm always lending with the money and the resources in the end.
Well, but this is actually building on what Carolina said, that not each and every project should find solutions for themselves, or that everything that we have learned here should then remain in our little silo. But this is also where maybe the potential of a civic-public partnership could be, that speaking maybe or thinking of a foundation that could be founded from here, but that could then travel elsewhere and could also, for example, then go to Dragoner Areal Rathausblock, another big urban development site that is very similarly to here, also entering into this new collaboration. But there's also, of course, there's many different more sites that we can think of, Messe ICC, for example. So what would need to be done today and out of this process in order to found this umbrella organization? Who would need to be on board? What resources would be needed in order to establish something that will outlive what we have today, that would outlive the model project, and would basically form the support structure that you have mentioned?
You're asking me again? Well,
everyone.
I think, let's brainstorm. I think in the end, we need to maybe have a discussion in the political field and together with civil society organizations on why we would need this, and why we would need this some kind of a platform or foundation or organization that does not just involve itself with one project. And I think one important key development, I think, is that we've all experienced in one way or the other, is that we are living in a city where a lot of important spaces are vanishing because of expulsions, because of gentrification and so on, and that a lot of spaces that people need and want and use in their daily life as a meeting place, as a neighborhood place, are in danger, and that if we don't organize ourselves between civil society and administration and politicians and so on, and also private actors that are part of these networks and neighborhoods, then we will, in the end, not live in the same city that we are living here today. And that is a question not only of it's a question of saving and of saving certain spaces, and but it's also a question of building up new spaces.
And how will we do that?
Yeah, we mentioned we need time and money for processes like this, and we mentioned that we need participation along the development processes, and we mentioned we need professional initiatives. And we have, I think, to think about how this initiative could be a kind of incubator for other initiatives, because this initiative cannot work as a company and now they are making another project in Spandau too. That doesn't work, because we need the nearness, or how to say, to the other sides, and we have maybe to organize how to share the experience of this project for other projects with other civil initiatives.
And how? I keep asking the same question. It's still the brainstorming session. How will we do that? Patricia, is there anything you mentioned before that you also worked in targeting similarly big struggles such as, or challenges such as climate issues? Is there anything that you can add to the brainstorming session that will help us here to move forward? Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think microphone again. Sorry.
I'll get this right at some point. There are some things that I've seen developed at the global level, where you try to design things at the global level, and that's obviously, I mean, we're talking about local level things here, but I think there are still some lessons from doing things at the global level, or doing things, prototyping things in one situation that's then taken even to another country, because I think that what I'm hearing here is that probably you're counting up all of the transaction costs that it takes, all the time and money it's taken to get here. And it's a very specific solution, right? But it's also something that can be learned from. And so what I've seen done, you know, in the climate community or in the health community has been to set up a facility that's a bit of a technical assistance facility that allows then that knowledge to be transferred different places, and everything will always need a local solution. You'll always have local considerations. You'll have a different community you're working with. You know, you have a different building you're dealing with. But a technical assistance facility that even within Berlin itself, if you have many different projects here that are buildings sitting like this, that you would want to take the same approach, we can't afford to do it the same way, spend all the same time and money. So that's what I've seen work well, but it requires some of you who have been involved in this lending your time so that you're not starting over with a whole new set of people. So that would be my advice. Yeah.
You posted, Caroline, what else is on the list to set up this technical facility?
I can offer a competence center for urban governance. So
and
I think
that would be you. So tomorrow I call you.
No, as an idea, like building the idea tower, something on top of what everybody else said, because I think, of course, what we see in the private sector doing very, very well is scaling fast, thinking globally, thinking broadly. But there's a different, there's a different effort behind it. There's a different idea behind it. You want to think fast, you want to scale quickly, because, there's also a profit-driven approach behind it. And I think in the public sector, we sometimes discuss much too often, although we have to understand using tax money, using public money efficiently is more important now than ever. And the efficiency idea has changed. We're not living anymore in a time where the least cost is actually the best offer. We're living in a time where we have to look at externalized cost, where we have to look at all of the consequences that are actually deriving from what we're doing right now for the next couple of years. So I think the cost understanding, the time understanding, things that we like repeat constantly has to change. It's a time where these kind of words mean something differently, and I think there we can learn from the private sector understanding, or public-private partnerships. How can we scale? How can we take the knowledge that you actually gathered here together? How can we systemize it? How can we standardize it? How can we open source it? How can we actually also, for me, it's super interesting to take this into the smart city realm. You know, how can we translate this into digital endeavors, you know, into data issues, into everything that will be even more narrowing our perspectives in the next couple of years. So I think we need the competence, what Ephraim said. We need time, we need money. Yes, we can organize that, I'm absolutely sure. And we need your knowledge and somebody who is actually helping to put it into something that can travel, that can travel fast and wide.
Thank you, Caroline. And is there urban governance competence centers, something that would be under your Schirmherrschaft, or is it something that would be actually need a more free, a more independent entity? Are we speaking of a foundation, or are we speaking of a new department within the Senate?
No, not a new department, but maybe the urban lab could be that center of the city lab. The city lab could be this new competence center, maybe, question.
Well, maybe. I think maybe one experience when we were, I was talking about the guidelines for participation that we set up with the Senate and with the districts, that are now starting with these contact offices in every district and on the Senate level for public participation. And the model that we chose there was that these contact offices will have staff both from the administration and from a different actor, from an external service provider, so to say, but inviting also civil society initiatives to take up that role. And I think that this could be an important idea for such a lab or competence center to take up to use the resources of both entities. And because these processes that we are talking about are processes that need to transform administrations and therefore need also people that are competent in administration. This is something that I've learned in the last year, that it is a specific competence to work in these hierarchic fields, and that is political, and you know, politics play a role, law plays a role, and how administrations and institutions work. And you also need people who understand and are part of civil society. And I think that this would be an important element of this kind of a lab or competence center.
Fortunately, the City Lab is very much interested to have a space here at Haus der Statistik. I think we're having a call next week. I'll definitely drop the Urban Governance, Lab Competence Center. This is it for this panel. I'm very happy that the next panel will actually not end this discussion, but build on what we have learned so far. Konrad and his guests, also the next panel will be in German, just as a heads up. They will touch upon all the underlying forces that we have also mentioned here, time and money, but also power and resources, and the, above all, always luring question of who actually owns the land, because if we don't deal with that question, then we can build up a lot of competence centers, but they will not lead to anything. I would like to thank my guests here on the orange couch. This was a start to a conversation about civic public partnerships. This was the first brainstorming sessions. We're taking up the ideas. Patricia, we will invite you again to Berlin. Carolina, unfortunately, is here in Berlin, and I'm sure we will continue the discussion. Haus der Statistik is not finished next week. We will still have some time to build up the competence center and also talk more about how the prototype that we have here here today with Co-op 5 can actually be transferred to a long-term securing the spaces so that they will be also in the future in joint collaboration between, or managed in joint collaboration between civil society, politicians, and administration. Thank you very much, and Konrad, I'll hand over to you.